Hey Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Nick. How are you?
Fantastic. Happy Podcast Friday.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
A couple of episodes ago, we had talked about why I became and continue to be a financial planner. And so today I thought, what a great idea to make it your turn, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I can be as compelling as your story was.
Oh, I think it's going to be fantastic. Yeah, tell us your story. Start from the beginning.
I love your unmatched enthusiasm. So the reason I say it might sound a little less compelling is, the start of my career was much more accidental than yours. Um, and you know, um, how I got started was basically looking for a job and not having a true career path, and happened to meet the right people at the right time who were in the industry and needed help, and said,
Hmm.
hey, you're pretty much a nerd, why don't you come be a nerd about this stuff? And at the time, I had no connection to finance. I had taken several economics classes in college, a lot of political science. I was a political science major, had taken a lot of econ along with it, and was, definitely, enjoyed the process of like aspects of the economy that were influenced by public policy and such. But at the time, I was teaching literature and writing at a community college, and which might as well have been volunteer work in terms of career prospects. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I like to think I was pretty good at it for a 26-year-old who was younger than a lot of his students,
Yeah.
but 25-year-old. Go back. I started this business in the year 2000, so I think that was my 26th, going on 27 birthday. So my friend John basically said, hey, come on, you're wasting your time, come work with me. And I didn't know an IRA from a joint account. I kind of vaguely knew what a mutual fund was in theory, but no idea how they worked. uh,
Yeah.
and it's funny, I, I've never been a math person, but I've always liked the concepts of how to put this, like I thought Excel was the coolest computer program, and I had no use for it, right? And that sounds silly, but it was like all of a sudden it was like, hey, I've got these like things in my mind that I like to do, and now I have
Uh-huh.
a subject matter, right? I have
Right.
something to get analytical about, and that really appealed to me, and I really enjoyed it, and dove into that part of it with both feet, like like learning about building portfolios and managing that end of it. And I was working in an environment that was very much a traditional investment brokerage kind of world, right?
Hmm.
We were kind of ahead of the game in some respects. We were doing fee for management kind of work when we could. There was still commissions and other things involved, but we were kind of, and this is through no like it wasn't me. I was a babe in the woods when it came to this stuff, but the people I worked for were already, even within the context of that part of the industry, we're already starting to think like financial planners in a way that maybe you didn't see everywhere else.
Hmm.
And I credit, my early mentors for that, even though the environment we worked in wasn't necessarily conducive to it.
Right.
So, and we've talked about all the different ins and outs of the different types of firms in the industry, but um, so along the way though, I started to like realize, hey, we're basically we're viewed by most of our clients as the investment guy, but we really shouldn't make investment recommendations without more context, right?
Hmm.
And I remember when the bank that we worked for gave us our first like real financial planning tools. I'd been there like 2.5, 3 years before I even saw financial planning software,
Wow.
or had that conversation with any of our managers about like how you could, there was no
Right.
training around that. It was all how to build portfolios and
Mm-hmm.
how investments operated. And it started, and again, crediting the advisors I worked with to say, hey, this is cool. Now, when someone says, I want to save money for college for my granddaughter, we can actually, plug in some numbers and show them,
Right.
well, if you do this for the next several years, it was like little bits and pieces of financial planning were starting to come together. And, it was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of the way I see this starting to fit together. And, so, I wouldn't have called myself a financial planner at that point. I was basically in the investment industry,
Right.
you know, and, but it was like starting to realize that we needed to be financial planners. We couldn't really be, you know, um, just investment advisors. It just didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I changed jobs. I went kind of on my own to a different bank after a while. And that was a little bit better, but it was still a very similar experience. I just had more control over the process.
Okay.
But, I remember, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, I call it kind of the matrix moment in my career when because we were given in that system, we were given some pretty cool. In fact, I had access to Money Guide Pro, which is the software we still use today. This was,
Okay.
what was that? 2006, I think. So,
Wow. The early days of Money
yeah,
Guide
yeah. I
Pro,
mean,
I'm sure.
that software has gone through several iterations since then, but it was like, okay, we're getting to the point where I can see how you can do, I hate to use the word comprehensive planning because that gets used too much in this industry, but start to put together. And so the matrix moment for me was when, I put together these templates that were like a budding financial plan. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here's what we've talked about for your goal. Like not very different from what we do with our new clients when we bring them on board these days. And it was like, okay. And that all boils down to, here's what I want to recommend for you. And I
Right.
ran all that through our compliance department. And they were like, see, here's the thing, Dave. That makes you a fiduciary. And we can't let you, use these and become a fiduciary because then you have a legal obligation. And I was like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean I'm not responsible for, what, and it was funny because I kind of like that side of the industry kind of talks around the fact that, they're not fiduciaries and
Right.
it's kind of a buyer beware mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And, at that point, so that, I had that matrix moment, I guess, where it was like, now I can't unsee the fact that,
Right.
this system I'm working in isn't necessarily what I want to do for my clients. And about the same time, well, it was probably a year or two later, we did a book review of The Investment Answer.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a period of time in there where I was just frustrated. And then I read that book, and that was probably 2010. So the Matrix moment was probably 2008 thereabouts, and
Okay.
there was a little gap in there, but I was kind of frustrated and didn't know how to fix the problem. And I read that Investment Answer book, which you can go back and listen to our podcast on that from a month or two ago. But I came home and I remember telling my wife, when I read this, I kind of knew the advisor I wanted to be when I grew up,
Yeah.
that I wanted to be the kind of guy they would recommend.
Yeah.
So, that, was kind of like the no turning back point. And about the same time, serendipitously, I ran into an acquaintance at the time that I'd lost touch with her, but Beth Baer, who
Mm-hmm.
founded the firm that we're both partners in now. And we were in the airport on the way to the Financial Planning Association's annual conference. And we had met a few years before, but had kind of lost touch. And at the
Okay.
time, she had just had a client look her in the eye and say, you need a succession plan. You need somebody in here so that if something happens to you, I'm not on my own. And it was one of her dear friends and good clients had said that to her. And at the same time, I was just as frustrated as I was ever going to get with the system, with the
Yeah.
investment side of the system that we were in. And when we got back from the conference, we had coffee. And 3 months later, I was working for Beth or with Beth.
Wow.
And that was 10 years ago this next month.
Wow.
So
And you guys were at the proverbial kitchen table back then, right?
literally, yeah, which is still carries over in our mission statement. But, and in the name of this podcast, Kitchen Table
Right.
Finance,
Right.
that's because Beth started our firm at her literal kitchen table where she sat with clients with a yellow notepad. And Beth, so it's really an evolution, right? So to kind of bring this back around, you asked me how I became a financial planner or why I became a financial planner.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was accidental, but to be able to actually call myself a financial planner, that was because I kind of started to see how powerful and important the investment industry was for people, but how it was really disconnected from what it should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there. Long answer to a short question.
I love it. So what is it in your day-to-day that you're doing now? What keeps you around? What's going to keep you around for the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years, Dave?
Yeah. I still really, really I like being the kind of interpreter between the confusing world of the portfolio.
Yeah.
I say, it's not just, to me, it's not just about, alphas and betas and deltas and gammas and, all the measurable statistics and valuations and correlations that go into building a portfolio. It's being able to just help people not have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah.
And focus on what the end results can mean for them.
Right.
So.
Absolutely. And so was it 2 years ago now that you went back to get your master's, or was it 3 year in financial planning?
Well, I finished it a year ago last month. So It was a 2-year program. So I've had it so it was 3 years ago that I started it, finished it a year ago.
Awesome.
Yeah, I did that through Kansas State, and that was interesting because, again, backing up to where I started, it was all the formal training in the beginning was all about portfolio building and investments, right? How does a bond work? How do you figure out the taxable equivalent yield on a municipal bond for somebody in the 28% tax bracket?
Right.
And how much in stock should a portfolio have versus bonds, and, the nuts and bolts stuff. And then I did the CFP program, and that starts filling in the financial planning blanks, right? Like how, if you're going to do this in the portfolio, what does that mean for taxes? And then if that, what are all these different levers you can push to build a financial plan? That's great too. What the Kansas State program did, because it technically, and people that know me are going to be like, you took a degree that focused in what? It's actually a lot of what is now labeled financial therapy.
Yeah.
And how to talk to people about their portfolio, about their money experiences, and how they connect with their portfolio. Because as you and I well know, nobody can look at their portfolio objectively. It's impossible. Right. And it's about figuring out, like our job a lot of the time is to figure out how John and Jane Doe think about money, because that's going to determine whether they can psychologically weather a down market or, successfully use those funds down the road. It doesn't matter what the absolute returns are. It's how people think about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that plays so well into what you talked about, which is, what you love about the industry, which is kind of taking the complexity and explaining it to clients. And I think that
Yeah.
psychology piece, that therapy piece just dovetails into, when and how to talk to clients and what to give them and how to walk them through that for
Yeah.
sure.
Now, I also am self-aware enough to know that I am never going to be anybody's true therapist. I'm not holding myself out as
Yes.
that. There are people that were in my program that now are, delving into childhood memories with people to try to unpack problems. And you know me well enough. That's probably not my strong suit, but being able
Sure.
to understand it on a better level to connect it with clients. That's the important thing.
Yeah, I think there's that fine line there between understanding it and being able to help someone
Yeah.
fix it or overcome it, right?
Right. Yeah. That's a better way to put it. Yeah. I probably cannot solve your problems, but at least we'll be able to put the finances in the context of what's
Right,
going on.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
that is fantastic, Dave. I appreciate you sharing with our listeners kind of your story and evolution. And, it's remarkable. I think a lot of times, just as humans, we fail to like think about how far we've come and what
yeah.
we've been able to
Yeah.
accomplish. And
Yeah.
I know your career has gone a long way since being a professor.
I was never a professor. I was an instructor at a community college. Let's not get ahead of
Sorry.
ourselves. Oh, but
Instructor Dave has come a long way, and it's a remarkable testament
well,
to
thank
you
you.
and what you've been able to do. So,
Thank
congrats on
you.
all that.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And with that, if any of our listeners have questions for Dave, I'm sure he'd be more than willing to answer. Feel free to shoot us an email at info@srbadvisors.com on anything today or any questions or things you'd like to see on the podcast in future weeks. Dave, as always, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
It was fun, Nick. I'll talk to you later.